This episode, how to get away from it all, Catholic style, and so much more. The Catholic Underground starts right now. Yes, emergency exits are to the forward and to the rear of the aircraft. You have found the Catholic Underground. We are the podcast cutting through the noise and bringing you the topics that matter. It's episode number 440. Oh, for those of you who are keeping score, I know I am.
Yeah.
I'm Father Chris Decker, a priest of the Diocese of Baton Rouge in the state of Louisiana in these United States of America. And joining me, we've got Kathleen Lee.
Yes.
Also present physically and spiritually here.
In America.
In America.
Here we are.
Also, Olivia Galino. She may be quasi-Sicilian.
There's no quasi about it, but yes.
Very Sicilian.
Yes.
Yeah. But she's joining us here in studio. Yeah.
In these contiguous
Yeah,
48
we are the 48
states?
contiguous states.
Yes.
Also, but not joining us on Earth, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, on the Jeff Star 1 near-Earth orbit satellite, Transponder 1, Jeff Blackwell.
You got me going in circles, Father.
It's true. It's a low orbit, but it's a friendly orbit.
But we won't do any of that circle back stuff, okay?
No, that's right. And no, please no. And then as the fish comes up on the screen, we thought that it would be a fantastic opportunity in the midst of this Lenten season to talk about the retreat.
Ah, yes.
You know, I mean, I think everybody, in certainly in the Christian world, but in the Catholic world as well, has heard about the notion of going on a retreat. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we can look at a retreat as a running away. Sometimes we see it as a getting away. But for us as Catholics, and certainly as Christians, the notion of a retreat is nothing new. It goes all the way back through our salvation history.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
It does. And in fact, I mean, in the ancient world, I mean, I obviously have no proof because I am not a time traveler, regardless of what anyone may have told you in any age where you find somebody that looks like me. The notion of a retreat goes back to wanting to commune with God, wanting to come to know God. Yeah. And so even in pre-Christian civilizations, there had to have been things like retreats to go off by oneself.
I think you can even trace it back to, I'm thinking like the Garden of Eden, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think about, Genesis 3, whenever, so this is after the fall, but it talks about how like they heard God walking in the garden
in the breezy part of the day.
Yeah, in the breezy part of the day.
Yeah,
and
right.
But the presupposition there is, number one, that they know what God's footsteps sound like.
Yeah.
And number two, presumably because they would have walked with God.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they live in God's garden, right? It's the garden of God. And we've talked about this in a previous show just recently, that they lived literally in God's garden, right?
Yeah.
And so they communed with God on a daily basis, right? And that's a kind of retreat, right? Because who are you getting to know?
One could say that Eden is the original retreat,
Yeah.
and the reason we are getting away is so that we can be with the one who is being himself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And be closer to that original purpose in our life, as human beings, to be, to go back to the original place where we're supposed to be.
That's right, where we had origin.
Yeah.
And that's actually like one of my favorite definitions of, it's a lo-fi definition of discernment that someone told me one time. It was like just knowing what God smells like, knowing what God sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Think back to like when you lived in your parents' house or like when you had roommates or something. And like, I don't know, like when I was in college, I had 3 roommates. I was one of 4 people who lived in a very small apartment. And I could tell just by the way the door opened who it was,
Yeah.
And like in my parents' house, I can tell by the way like they dropped their keys on the counter who it was, And same with like my siblings. Yeah, like you know just by like the way people like sniff their nose who it is.
Yeah, right.
And we should be that intimate with God,
Yeah.
but that only happens with how close we are to Him, how much time we spend with Him.
That's right.
Yeah.
And isn't it just amazing how the Lord intends to be known through the senses?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what the sacraments of the church are. The sacraments are sensible ways in which we can come to know who God is and to listen for the sound of His footsteps, to smell the elements that come together that form the liturgy of the Mass. I mean, how many times do you Do you walk into a church and you know, it's before the next liturgy, but you smell the incense from the previous Mass and you go, I mean, that's like a little nasal retreat for me, if I may be so bold.
Yeah.
And I was. And so, again, if you look in the scriptures, you've got Elijah. Elijah, of course, is fleeing in 1 Kings chapter 19. He's fleeing for his life. Sometimes when we actually do get to go on a retreat, it probably feels like that. When we're fleeing, I have to get away, otherwise I'm going to kill someone. You know? But Elijah is fleeing, and in the midst of all this, the Lord is saying, I intend to pass by you. I intend to visit you. And so Elijah, as he's fleeing, he kind of perks up, and he comes to this little spot where he's waiting, and there's the fire, and he's like, surely God's in the fire. There's, you know, the earthquake, and surely God's in the earthquake, because God does big stuff.
Right, yeah.
And then there's a whisper on the wind, and that's where God is, and that's what begins this this passing by of the Lord. And so, I mean, Elijah essentially is led on retreat, and he has to get through all the noise to actually find that small thing, that small voice, that little whisper, you know.
And what I love about that particular passage too is that it takes him some time to even get to the point where he can receive that. Like he has, I think it's a messenger who like tells him first to take a nap, and then wakes him up, gives him some food, and then tells him to go back to sleep, and then wakes him up again, gives him some more food. And then he like has all of these, you know, God was not in the wind, God was not in the fire, God was not in the earthquake. And I love that because like that's what our kind of our retreat experiences are like. I mean, like
that's true.
You know, you kind of have to like go through maybe even a couple of days if you have the luxury of like going on a multi-day retreat, or even just like you know, an entire day, 24 hours to just like cycle through the basic necessities and just like, I don't know, almost like filter out, detox from like the world, and then just recalibrate.
Well, to take care of your physical needs. You know, we're just talking about that. Just, you know, when you look at retreats, sometimes they can start, you know, at 5 o'clock in the morning and end at 12:30 at night, and it's like, what, you know, and some of the greatest retreats I've been on, they say, hey, like, we give you permission to go take a nap in free time, you know, like, and it's like, what? That's awesome.
God bless you.
To take care of your spiritual needs. You think about in any context, like, you know, when you're a teacher, if a child comes to school hungry, they're not going to take in any kind of information as you're trying to teach them about Shakespeare, because they're worried and they don't feel good, and
their
hungry.
needs aren't met.
You know, and so, you know, when we are able to take care of ourselves physically, you know, and so we go and talk about that for 4 days. You know, how our spiritual life is tied into our physical life. You know, and how if we're not careful, you know, they can affect each other negatively.
Right. One even can begin to disintegrate the other.
Right.
And certainly we'll talk in another part in the show about what it looks like when you actually make it on retreat. What's the rhythm? What's that all about? I do love the fact that as Elijah was being led on this retreat, an angel appears and says, take up and eat, lest the journey will be too much for you. So whenever we do go on retreat, that's an important part of the cycle, is taking up and eat. Taking up and eating. Pardon my gerundive usage. And so that is part of it too, is this notion that we are fed not just at a clock time of the day, but we are fed by the Lord in the midst of retreat. And it might be at a time where we think we got it. You know, Elijah was just trucking along, and the angel has to kind of pause him and say, look, you have to rest, take up and eat, lest the journey will be too much for you. You won't actually be able to go to the place where the Lord is passing by if you don't follow this rhythm. In fact, Jesus himself, our Lord, makes it very clear several times throughout the scriptures that the notion of retreat is not just a good idea, it's essential. It's essential to coming to know who God is. You know, certainly Mark chapter 6, verse 31, where he says to his disciples, most specifically the ones who are closest to him, that were trying to learn the cycle of life of being a disciple of Jesus, what it is to live in his with him as a rabbi, with him as their teacher. And he says, come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. People were coming and going in great numbers, and they had no opportunity even to eat. So Jesus is saying, in the midst of your ministry, because many of you who listen to the Catholic Underground or who are watching, at some point in your parish, you're involved in ministry or an apostolate, or even if you kind of sit on your front stoop and you talk with people all day, and that's kind of your apostolate is apostolate of communicating the word of Jesus by simply just being approachable, you still have to be fed. And the only way that we can be fed is by listening to our Lord. Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. And that's different than where COVID-19 has found so many of us over the past year. Because we've been in a deserted place in our homes, but there's been very little rest.
Yeah.
Because there's been so much restlessness present. And so to take the Lord at his word, to truly go away by ourselves to a deserted place and rest a while, it's very different than just simply being alone. Very different. And of course, in the history of the church, the notion of a retreat is also something that is not foreign, because as you go into the Desert Fathers, they were really some of the first retreatants, where you have like St. Anthony of the desert goes into the desert himself so that he can find God, and he willfully makes his life about a Lenten 40-day type Jesus going into the desert experience, because he knows that the Lord dwelled there. Even in his hunger, even in his temptation, the Lord dwelled in the desert, and he was present there. And so St. Anthony is a good example. St. Benedict, of course, was also one of those desert fathers of a kind. I'm trying to think of the other desert fathers that St. Ephraim the Syrian, I believe, was one of them. And so what's really interesting is that from these desert fathers, so these are folks who are, at least the ones I know, are all saints now, you get these incredibly, incredibly rich, Bavarian cream-filled donut-level spirituality.
Yes.
That's just this, you look, that looks like it could be helpful, and then you really dive into the words, and they strike you right to the heart.
Yeah.
Because when you go to the desert, you go to battle.
Yeah. I'm thinking of, the book, The Noonday Devil?
Oh, yeah, The Noonday Devil. Acedia, of course, is the $5 word of battling that slothfulness that comes right after lunch.
And I'm going to look up real quick who the author is, but
that's a great book.
Jean-Charles Nault, I don't know. But there's a lot of excerpts in there from the Desert Fathers, and it's exactly for the reason that you're talking about, because they understood so deeply the need to be away from the world in order to understand like the heart of Christ, understand like the life of virtue. Yeah. And they weren't running away from like their problems or running away even from the world's problems. Like they were running away from all of the things that will distract them from who and what they were supposed to be and who and what the world was supposed to be. And so I recommend that book, but it's definitely like a lot to chew on.
Yeah, for sure.
But it when I think of the Desert Fathers, I don't know, that was the first thing that came to mind, because it's just so rich with their spirituality, because it's exactly what you're talking about. Right,
they willfully go into an arid place to experience the aridness of spirit. Yeah, and in experiencing that dryness of spirit and of prayer, on the other side of that is this immense flood of the Lord's presence. And I mean, you and I battle acedia in one form or another, right? Because we all of us, especially in this past year, have known what it means to be by ourselves and then to list into this kind of apathy and slothfulness, And I think that has to be named, because it's a real spiritual reality. It's not just I'm depressed. It's not just I'm feeling despair. But there's also a spiritual component to that as well. Yeah. And obviously the behavioral sciences are helpful in dealing with some of the psychological things that brings about. But the spiritual reality of confronting it head on and saying, Lord, this is where I am. I feel dry here. And then to allow the Lord to speak to our hearts, while perhaps we're getting some of the behavioral help that we need too,
of course.
But there is a spiritual component to all of this. And I think, I'm not a prophet, but only by virtue of my baptism. But I think that's one of the things that the evil one wanted to try to use in the midst of all of this, shunting us to aloneness, is he wanted us to arrive at loneliness. But it's different to be alone than it is to be lonely.
Yes.
And the Desert Fathers are are fantastic at allowing us to be alone with God and to let him speak to our hearts, even if there's a lot of silence and even if there is some passing through this spiritual dry time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's another, kind of echo back to Eden, and John Paul II talks about this in his Theology of the Body Catechesis, that Adam and Eve experienced, on their own, what's called original solitude, and then together a double original solitude. And you look at that word solitude and you think, oh, that's a bad thing. We don't want to be
right. Nobody wants to be in solitary, right? Solitary confinement is prison, where you're,
that's something to be avoided.
Where your senses are deprived.
Yeah. And so you think, original solitude, that's got to be something that we have to avoid. And then double original solitude, that's even worse. But
2 times the solitude.
But it's exactly what you're talking about. They knew how to be alone with God, and then together how to encourage each other to be alone with God. And that was the beautiful perfection of their love for one another. And so the Desert Fathers understood that aloneness, and then really through heroic virtue, tried to recreate it after the fall.
That's right.
And it really is heroic because they were also doing that in a time of persecution.
That's right. And then you get some very kind of extreme versions of this when you look at, like we've mentioned them before, like the Stylites.
Yes.
Those monastics who scurry up a pillar, and that's their retreat.
And live on top.
And that's what they do.
My students, I don't know if you've ever talked about this in your class, my students are fascinated by the Stylites. Just cannot understand because it's so radical.
It is.
Find a modern corollary. I defy you.
Vertically, it's no.
Yes, you can't.
Having a townhouse in New York is not exactly the same thing. Being in the penthouse of the top of a building. Maybe it is, but a narrow column and sitting atop it so that you can not only be a witness to others that hate. Communion with God is important, but also this is the place that I can find it. Is like trying to climb to heaven almost physically to place myself in this middle ground between the heavens and the earth.
Or even Julian of Norwich, she was one of the people who lived in the walls of a church. What was that? What was she called?
Oh yeah, what were those called?
It's called Come to Me. Come to me in the middle of the night.
Is that an anchoress?
Yes, thank you. Or an anchorite or something. Yeah, she lived in the little between the columns,
niches in the
walls of the church. Yeah.
Yep.
Again,
Kathleen,
very
there's hope
radical
for you
way
yet.
I don't think you can fit a 3-bedroom house in the middle of the walls.
I don't think you can fit a Kathleen Lee in the walls of the church.
Oh man.
Or a chunk.
Well, with that, I think we might take a little brief respite to remind you that we are the Catholic Underground. That's right, my friends. You have found the Catholic Underground. You're watching, you're listening, and you're experiencing in general our time with you. Yeah. And we're glad that you do. I'm Father Chris, joined by Kathleen, also Olivia, and Jeff's up in space. And Ed, I didn't introduce Ed at the top of the show. Ed is running the video. So if it's your first time with us, it's Ed that does that.
Yeah.
You're watching on the video.
Ed do that.
He also fixes the AC in his spare time.
He also fixes the air conditioner, and he takes out the trash.
Yes.
He does so many things.
He does.
If you get here early enough, he's even replenishing the paper towels and stuff.
But he hasn't brought us any food pills from the Jeff Star one. So.
No. Well, they're not very delicious.
Speaking of,
it's just protein packed.
Speaking of, I haven't had any baked goods lately.
That's true.
Yes.
Not mentioning any names.
Well,
Kevin.
on that note, we probably should talk about, if we're going to talk about retreat, and we are going to go into the life of a retreat,
right?
We should first talk about what a retreat isn't.
Yep.
And for that, I suppose we would call that the segment of the show, The More Kathleen Knows. Because if there's one thing that Kathleen knows about, it's
a retreat.
What a retreat isn't.
Yeah, this is what I've been involved in retreat ministry since I was in high school. So we're talking probably almost 20 years.
Yeah. I don't even want to think about it for myself then. I don't.
There have been many, many, many retreats I've been on. And, there are a lot of things I think in today's society that we call go to the spa retreat. And I'm like, what? No, just go to the spa. Right? Yeah. These things that we have spiritualized.
Yeah. Yoga with goats and all that. No, thank you.
These
no, thank you. First of all, yoga, no. But goats and yoga, no.
I mean, goats by themselves, probably. So I would have a good time.
Now, yogurt, I would like a yogurt-themed retreat.
with goats.
Well, they're providing the yogurt.
Ooh, goat yogurt. We've
Oh.
really gone very
Sorry.
far.
Okay.
But
Keep going.
There it goes. Goodbye, show. Yeah, so like there are a lot of things that we can look at, even if we have an opportunity to go on a retreat.
Yeah.
You know, so first there are a lot of things that are not retreats that we may call retreats, a spa retreat, you know, whatever. There are things that we look at an actual retreat as when they are actually not, right? And so one, a vacation.
Yeah.
Now we've talked a lot in the last couple of shows about space and time, and you know, about making those sacred and making them set apart, right? Vacation and a retreat are two very different things, and we can see them as very similar, right? You go away, you relax,
You forget life in progress.
and like, but one of them you sit on the beach with, you know, a fruity drink in your hand, and the other one you commune with the all-knowing, all-powerful, one true God. Like, you know, one has sometimes and most times almost no purpose, right? And a retreat has some serious purpose. And so retreat is not a time to just go, you know, even if you take a retreat somewhere that's on location.
That's right.
You know, there are beautiful retreats that you can take, or places you can go on retreat around the world.
That are also vacation spots.
Right.
But I think the intent is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And that space, right, is good and purposeful. You know, we could talk about that for days. All those retreats that we've been on that have been held at beautiful retreat centers, that space is, you know, is meant for something, not just to visit and take, you know, a tour of. So retreat, not a vacation, although sometimes it may spiritually feel that way because you feel refreshed, right?
Yeah, sometimes we can pray on vacation because we're getting away from the hustle and bustle.
Yeah.
But I think that what you said is very correct, is that when we go on retreat, it's an intentional desire to encounter God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, and we talk about that space when you talk about retreat centers. I love a good retreat center, and I also always love when you go and like I was helping out with a retreat this weekend, and I went to this beautiful retreat center, and I like the first thing I walked in, I realized it was like 8 o'clock when I got there, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Because there's no TV. Right, there's no internet. There's not like, you know, a kitchen down the hall with a mini fridge. You know, we're not staying at a hotel.
Yeah.
Right.
Even the space that you're in, like on retreat, the living quarters should align you with what your purpose is.
Yeah, they're usually pretty
there.
simple.
Yeah, like nobody's coming down the block and knocking on your door seeing if you need more towels. You know, usually you have to provide your own, or you know,
Right, yeah, you bring
And
everything.
sometimes the life in the bedspread that is on the bed originated well over 35 years ago.
Yes.
But that's
Yes.
part of the charm of it.
True that. I slept on an egg crate mattress this weekend. It was phenomenal.
Nice.
Okay, yeah. So in the same sense of it, what it's not being in terms of you know, sticking kind of with this vacation theme is, it's also not like, you know, when we're talking about amenities and things like that, you know, when we want to simplify our life, I love going to a good retreat center that has good food, but like I get really frustrated when somebody is like, man, the food here is really bland. Yeah, because it's not supposed to be like a culinary world tour, right? Where you've gone to Italy and now you're eating mozzarella and spaghetti, right? And this is not.
Unless you're in Italy
This is
on
not
your
a-
retreat.
that's true.
In which case, it's every meal, and it's
Which in that case, good for you. I've never been there. I'd like to go there. So give me a holler, you know, at your earliest convenience.
although
But-
there are some retreat centers that the food is.
yes, right. And
I'm
that's
looking at you, Manresa House of Retreats.
and that's good,
in
right?
Louisiana.
But even when we, you know, like, you know, when we look at our surroundings, the place where we're at, what we eat, what we do, should, in my humble opinion, should be simplified.
Yeah.
Right. Because if we go to a retreat center because we want to eat, you know, we want to eat their food, and that's why we go there, then we're missing the point of why we're there.
That's right. Yeah. Because even that can distract you from the still small voice of
Yeah.
God.
Now tell me about this one, because I've seen this one a couple of times. In fact, I was talking to somebody about this weekend where they offered marriage retreats that were also cruises. Yeah, which I was like, at first I was like, yeah, let's sign up for that. But like, can we, you know, and
Yeah.
you have been on
I haven't yet. I was going to say, I have not
Have
yet.
you never been on a cruise at all?
I've been on a cruise,
Okay.
but I haven't been on a retreat
But
cruise.
have you been on retreats or have you been on trips that were like you attended as a priest and you said mass and did some spiritual things, but weren't necessarily like retreats?
Well, I mean,
know what I mean?
I've led pilgrimages, and that's a whole nother kind of
Yeah.
show. A pilgrimage can sometimes feel a bit more vacation-y.
Yeah. Because you're
depending on-
seeing many
and
things.
then but then there are sometimes a pilgrimage is very much like a traveling retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it all depends on the retreat master, you
Yeah.
know, and it depends on the tour company that you're going with, the pilgrimage company.
Yeah.
And I've seen some pilgrimage companies that handle it they realize that the Catholics that are
Yeah.
going on this thing want a retreat.
Yeah.
But then also want some of the amenities of of going to another country or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I just think like, I mean,
it's a fine line.
Yeah. And like, here's the deal. You want to go on vacation and you want to bring a priest and you want to say mass and maybe,
Please do.
maybe have some Bible studies. Awesome.
Yep.
Don't call it a retreat.
Yeah.
Call it a cruise.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
call it for what it is. And then you're free to do what you do on a cruise without feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Go and, I was about to say bobsled, not, bobsled on a cruise. Jet ski.
Not yet.
You know,
Maybe an Alaskan one.
Go and jet ski, go and snorkel, go and swim with the dolphins and have a good time
Mm-hmm.
and make it a vacation, right? But these are not retreats, and again, spa days, these kinds of things. I went to spa the other weekend. It was awesome. It was very relaxing. I don't feel any closer to God because, I had a
Pedicure.
hot stone massage. I just don't. I feel very relaxed. I feel awesome about my life, but
Yeah.
I don't feel any closer to God. So when we call things what they are, right? When we call it a retreat and we know what a retreat is, it helps us to enter into it more fully.
Yep.
Right? And we know what the purpose is with our space, with our time, with our purpose. We can enter into that retreat and do what we need to do.
That's right. Yeah. And words mean things,
Yeah,
right?
for
Being
sure.
intentional about calling this a retreat and being, we at Catholic Radio has the Advent at Sea coming up hopefully
Yes.
this year. And we're going to attempt to straddle it. I mean, we know that it's a time to get together,
Yeah.
but it's also going to be a little spiritual. I
Yeah.
don't know. Anyway, we'll see you on the other side of the break to talk about retreat stuff. It's Catholic Underground. Stay there. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Turn then, most gracious Advocate, thine eyes of mercy towards us, and after this our exile, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. Alrighty, I was getting carried away there. You know this music by now. I'm Father Chris, joined by Kathleen Lee, Olivia Galino, Jeff Blackwell in space, and also Ed Ball running the video. And this is, in fact, the Catholic Underground, and we're talking about retreat life, that retreat life, and what you can expect when you go on a retreat, what it isn't, but also what it is. And we talked about certainly how it has its roots within our own Christian culture. But as we've kind of come through the ages, it's interesting that the retreat of today really kind of is a mini monastery. Have you noticed that about the retreat of today? The very first thing you become acquainted with is, well, what we'd call a rule of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want the Latin word, Jeff, an horarium. Yeah.
Wow,
Or if you want the
okay.
other Latin, now mostly Anglican word, the rota. Yeah.
Ooh.
The rule of life.
I love how there was a little bit of like across the river that came out when you said that. The rota.
The rota. Yeah, that's the rota. Yeah. The rota. Yeah. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about what you might expect. Obviously, your average your mileage may vary,
Right.
but typically it's about the same when you sign up for a retreat. Because most people are, I don't want to sign up for a retreat because I don't know I don't know what to
what
expect.
happens, what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
I certainly don't want to be vulnerable, but I
Right.
need what do you like?
Right.
Are you greeted by a hooded figure that brings you some,
Yeah.
you know? Sometimes
Come
those are cool.
this way.
Yeah. But
That's my favorite thing about a retreat is the very beginning, to see people like deer in the headlights walk in, like, what?
because Kathleen, of course, we should tell you, Kathleen, and really me, Olivia too. We've been on the other side of the retreat as retreat
Right.
workers, right? As those who are facilitating the retreat.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is an expectant kind of parenting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're watching people come in with their eyes wide,
Yeah.
going,
The look
I
of
don't
fear.
know what's happening
And I'm
here.
like, dude,
Somebody
oh,
made me do this. and
Yeah.
I
it's
don't
gonna
know.
be so good, and you're gonna like, and then by the end of the retreat, they're
They're the ones who are on the
Yeah.
mountaintop shouting.
yeah.
Even by like the next morning, people have kind of like shaken off the
Right.
fear. But at first,
Yeah.
it's like people were forced there against their will.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
My favorite, and we have all been involved in both youth retreats and adult retreats, and let me tell you, night and day. Youth retreats, it's like we're all going to stand out there and hold signs and do a tunnel and scream at you as you walk in. The kids are like, "What the heck?" Right? And
Those don't speak to me.
and young adult
Nor
retreat,
me.
our adult retreats really is like, oh, hey, welcome. Can we, can we get you a cup of coffee? And it's
That's
like,
right. Or something else.
Your room is this way. In 3
Right?
hours, we'll
So-
convene for dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So typically, if you're going for a 3-day retreat, which is I would say is probably most common in
normal.
terms of what people
Yeah.
can get away for, you arrive on a Friday evening, and usually it's after you've put the work day behind you, right? And so there's a time of arrival. And I mean, I know as a person who's gone on retreat, even today as a priest, if I go on retreat to a facility that that I've never been to before or haven't been in a while, there is this eagerness, but also this kind of trepidation, like
Yeah.
what's going to happen on the other side of this? Because if I'm going in for reals to a retreat, God is there,
yeah.
and He's waiting for me to unplug from everything. And
Right.
so yeah, you're usually greeted by the retreat workers. Sometimes that may be priests or religious if they're working the retreat. Oftentimes nowadays it's the volunteers that
Yeah,
are
like
facilitating
people,
the retreat. And then like there's a check-in. You get a packet, I guess.
Yeah.
Usually.
Map,
Because
schedule.
we should talk about, I guess, maybe the different types of retreats. There are preached retreats, and then there are directed retreats.
Yeah.
Right. So a preached retreat is where you go and you listen to conferences at specific times during the day.
Yeah.
And then a directed retreat is where you might have a conference where all the retreatants are gathered together, but you meet individually with a spiritual director,
Yeah.
and it's a one-on-one kind of a thing.
And then, maybe mention too that like both of those could also be like silent as well.
Yes, and those
you
could
know?
be those could either be a retreat where you're either encouraged to talk to people or not restricted from doing so.
Right.
But a silent retreat, you kind of enter into a covenant together, if you will, as you enter on retreat, that there are going to be what the monks would call a grand silence,
Yeah.
where there wouldn't be any speaking or communication with each
Right.
other by any means,
Yeah, like
unless
baseball
if-
motions or
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Unless you absolutely need to communicate with somebody.
Yeah.
Although what's really kind of cool, Jeff, is because the monks have developed over the centuries how to speak without speaking, because they observe the grand silence in many ways. They have a whole bunch of sign language that they've developed over the centuries, on like passing the pepper and things like that.
Really?
Oh, okay. I was
cool.
Yeah, you
wondering
have
if
to
that's
look it up.
considered conversing, though, even if
It kind of is, but again, it's not like an Olympic hurdle to
Right,
jump
yeah.
Okay.
to try to go out of your way to communicate.
It's the least invasive
Yeah.
Exactly.
form of just asking for
Yeah.
what.
All right.
The summer that Father and Chris and I met, I was a sophomore in high school, and we were on retreat, and they had a silence part of it. And you probably don't remember this at all, but it is one of the memories. Like, we had a time of silence at like 24 hours,
My.
and I about died. And there was one point where somebody, like, we were waiting, and somebody came to the door. They needed us to move our van that we were using. This is how long ago this was. And he came to the table. I was like, "This your van? It needs to move." And I was like. And so I was like, who
just
am I?
shaking
Who
your
do
head,
I
yeah.
like? Who do I? And I came over to you as a seminarian because you were the only adult in the room. And I was like, I had to break my silence, and I was like devastated as this like sophomore in high school. I was like, we need us to move the van, and you were like. And I was like, oh, I felt like such a failure. But I mean, it was necessary.
But that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Unavoidable. Were we going to do charades?
Yeah,
Right.
write it on the note. I don't know.
As I'm thinking back, she probably did try some charades first.
I probably did.
One
oh my
word
gosh.
rhymes with. Yeah. But yeah, and that's the thing. So you're not going out of your way, because
Right.
even like trying to the communication hurdle can itself be a red herring. It can be a misdirection,
Right.
you know. But so yeah, you move in. You're getting used to the facility. You know, you get to look in your room, you know, and see what that's all about. Get to kind of rummage through some of the stuff in the packet.
Yeah.
I know sometimes I like to just cause to see, you know, what's in the room. Usually there's a Bible. Almost always there's a crucifix.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's some note paper for you. At the retreat center that I know of that the priests in my diocese go to, Manresa, which is a fantastic retreat center here in the Diocese of Baton Rouge, there's almost always like a little bit of something left behind from the previous retreatant that they think you might need. So sometimes it's like a throat lozenge or something, you know.
Like a little prayer card.
Yeah, or a prayer card that
noticed
spoke to them, or even maybe some of the notes that they took that they wanted to leave behind.
I will
That's
say, I'm thinking back to like some of my retreat experiences of like getting there, and I typically go on silent retreats because I like those, and this is one of the ways that Kathleen and our personalities are very different.
Yeah.
But we mesh very well.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about like usually you get there and you typically probably have about 2-3 hours of like your time is your own before dinner, you know, walk around, pray, whatever.
Get used to the place.
Yeah.
And I don't know about y'all, but I have found that short out period of time, but then like even the next like 12-16 hours is usually like spiritually speaking a very intense time.
Yeah.
Like I'm usually in a very like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't have time for this. I'm like looking through like what you're saying, like look through the packet. I'm like looking at the conference.
That's going to be boring.
Yeah, I'm like,
I
that's
know
really
that
stupid.
already.
Yeah, like I already know about this. And I find that that's like a real, I almost think of it now as like a purge. Like all of the like, like in the filth just has to like get out before I can really receive.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's like a retreat experience that a lot of people have or if that's just me. But
I know I do. It takes me a while to unplug.
yeah. But just maybe, I don't know, I feel like maybe I should say that in case that's something that you've experienced on a retreat and you're like, maybe I'm just not a retreat person. I don't know. I think it's more normal
It is.
than we want to believe, but we're just maybe afraid to say it.
Yeah.
And that adjustment period is a real, it's definitely a good deal of us.
Yeah.
Because we're having to slow ourselves down
Right.
from the speed of life. There's also some spiritual warfare
Right.
to
I was
it
about
as
to say.
well.
Also, remember that
Obviously.
Satan doesn't want you on retreat.
Yeah, he doesn't want you to listen to the voice of God. He wants you to keep listening just to your
Right.
the inside of your head, you know. And so usually after you've arrived, after you've looked around, the first, if it's a preached retreat, the first conference might be in the evening. And these are usually kind of spiritually charged as well, because you're kind of getting the theme for what's it going to be about.
Yeah.
And I find that usually after that first talk on Friday evening, I am dead,
Yeah.
absolutely dead to the
yeah.
world, and I will sleep.
Yeah.
I will go to sleep. And I think that's one of the things that we ought to find permission for, and allow me to give you permission, is if you really do nothing for the first day, and even if it's a 3-day retreat, if you do nothing for the first evening and well into the next day, but sleep, then that itself is a gift.
Yeah.
The Lord says, come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to rest. We don't know how to rest in
Right.
our society, in our world today. Even when we're asleep, we're not resting,
Yeah.
with all the concerns that we have.
Yeah, I remember one of the first young adult retreats I went on. So making the transition from youth retreats, to where every minute until you pass out at 1:00 in the morning is scheduled. I at some point slept through a talk, and like I went to my room to rest my eyes and didn't wake up until the morning. Like that was, and I was devastated because I was like,
I'm doing it wrong.
They're gonna kick me out. Like I'm gonna have to go home. And they were like,
No.
No, yeah. And not to say that you go on retreat and sleep through everything. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not the point. But, but yeah, just giving your body that time to rest and relax.
And to realize that this is, in most cases, this is a decision that you're making to go on retreat.
Yeah.
And so all of these things are components of the retreat, are there for you, but you're not being held to them, by some sort of invisible laser beam,
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes that official permission to disengage, if you want to, from the official stuff, actually makes me want to go to them more.
Yeah.
So I feel as if giving that permission, typically if I'm a retreat leader, I will say, like, don't feel like you have to come to everything.
Yeah.
And you're getting permission to do what needs to be done for you to recharge spiritually, physically, mentally. And that takes some time. I find that the more you become part of a retreat culture, like the more you make a yearly retreat part of your life, that rebound period is a little bit less.
Yeah.
Of course, it depends on where you're coming from that particular week too. But so you maybe there's night prayer. Maybe you're already asleep. And then the next morning you wake up and Saturday morning, breakfast, morning prayer, usually your first conference. And one of the things that you're probably surprised about is that there are these long periods after the conferences where nothing is scheduled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is the battlefield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the temptation is always, okay, does this mean that I have to mentally sort through all of this information that I've received? Does it mean that I'm supposed to go grab my Bible? Does it mean I'm supposed to get my rosary? Does it mean that I'm supposed to, go into the chapel and spend time with the Lord in the Eucharist? What? And the answer is yes or no to all those things.
Yeah.
To be able to say, okay, Lord, was there like a nugget in what was being what was presented? And sometimes it is. It's like 6 words before a semicolon.
Yeah.
And it just sticks in your head, and to be able to unpack that, to say, okay, Lord, I'll be here. Because retreats are not about volume.
Yeah.
That's difficult for us. Retreat is not about how much I can pack in to my soul, right? Yeah. It's about how much I can let out so that the Lord can give me the little bit of nourishment that I truly need, and not the stuff I think I want.
Yeah, but you're exactly right that it's like a spiritual, like, what do I do with my hands kind of 2-hour period of like, there's something I'm supposed to be doing. Someone tell me what it is, and you almost like go to people and you're like, can I help with anything? Like, can I set up for mass? Do you need help cooking lunch? Like, would just give me a job, like
other than be here and do nothing.
Yeah, and that's hard for people who are involved in ministry or who are involved in retreat stuff. Like, it's incredibly difficult
to be a retreat
for me to go on retreat and not be like, let me do that. Like, give me that microphone, because that's what I do, but to go on retreat myself is difficult. And that's, I've experienced that with a lot of people. There are a lot of people who will come, and their spirituality is, I'm going to play in the band, and that's my spirituality. I'm going to do, I'm going to cook, for the retreat. I'm going to, run around and run errands. That's it. And a lot of times, and I think we've spoken about this before on the show, is we feel like that, like, as long as, I've been on retreat. I've been on retreat 6 times this year. No, you haven't. You've worked a retreat, or you've read at a mass, or or been involved in the parish mission, but did you sit down and listen? Did you participate in the mass otherwise? Nope. These are things that those of us who are really involved can get caught up in.
It's hard.
When we talk about the difference between a retreat and a vacation, there's a
difference between being a retreat and being a parishioner too.
Exactly, right? For someone who works a retreat and someone who goes on a retreat are 2 very different things.
I remember I was working a discernment retreat as a seminarian, and we had some young men who were themselves retreatants, but they also had musical gifts, and so they would help to play for mass. Just because they said, well, I can do that. I was like, okay. Well, they would sit in the chapel and rehearse all day long for the next thing.
Yeah.
So finally I said, guys, we don't need you. Thank you. You're very gifted. You're very talented, but you're running from something here. And they looked at me like I had just, slashed the tires of their car.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. But I said, like, guys, what are we doing here? Like, you're retreatants. I want you to
Good
be
for
able
you.
to hear what the Lord is saying.
Yeah.
They were mad. At least one of them is a priest today, I believe, as a matter of fact. But yeah,
And as my mom would say, you're welcome.
that's right. Yeah, you're welcome. And so another thing that might happen, certainly will happen on the retreat, is that you'll have time for Mass. You might be exposed to the Liturgy of the Hours, so the official kind of praying act of the church. You might be exposed to some beautiful liturgical or prayer practices that you're not usually accustomed to. So like the Rosary, maybe a scriptural Rosary or something like that.
Yeah.
And all these things are meant to give you some tools that you can take home with you. So you actually, if you go over a weekend, you might have Mass on Saturday morning, and so you're exposed to maybe a votive Mass of Our Lady or what a daily Mass looks like. Because oftentimes, many Catholics, the Sunday Mass is their bread and butter, and they're not exposed to the daily Mass experience. So to be able to be okay with the conference open time, the conference and then the open time, and then not to feel like we have to fill it with something. But one things you do need to be filled with is food. So there's almost always time for meals and multiple meals as well. Sometimes you're doing the retreat right whenever you finish the conference and you go for your little walk or whatever, and then a nap. And then you always feel like you're waking up to food. Like it's time to eat again. It's time to eat again. And that's actually a beautiful thing, because if you think about it, what's happening with you on retreat is you're in a womb, right? You're a newborn.
Yeah.
You're being fed. You're being given an opportunity to process what you've been fed, and then you're being given an opportunity to sleep, and then to be fed again. It's this beautiful cycle. That is as old as the Scriptures, and it really is as old as how God intended for us to receive life, right? To be nourished in life. Sometimes, they're great. I have a friend who just returned from a retreat. He says there's only like a 3/4 of a mile track around the retreat center. He says, but I walked about 8 miles. So because that's where the Lord had me. And so whenever the conference was over, I would just walk the circle, and he said that's where the Lord wanted to meet me. Some people, they find a bench and it becomes their bench, and that's where they find themselves.
We do a retreat during the summer I've spoken about Dumox Ministries, and that's where I first discovered the Eno hammock. It's a packable hammock, and I put it up, my hammock. I went to that hammock every time. And in fact, one time I felt like and it was my own spiritual, battle, but I felt like they had sprung silent time on us. And I was furious. Like it was an unnatural furious. Like I get furious about a lot of things, but like I remember I got up, right. And I'm like, wow, and I go outside, I got my hammock, and I rocked myself so hard that I fell asleep. But that was my space. Like that was where I went. And of course I was dealing with other things that needed to be, napped on. but that you're right. Like that's
a real place.
A walk or a space or, a bench or, Yeah.
And so typically that kind of cycle happens Friday night, all of Saturday. And then Sunday morning, you might have a conference talk to kind of wrap things up or to process some of the things that were going on. And then almost always there's a closing with Mass or something like that. You're the Sunday Mass. And then if it's a silent retreat, you're able to speak at lunch and to kind of process externally what's been going on. And that's really the long and the short of the retreat life, and what you perhaps can expect. Obviously, your retreat centers may vary a little bit, but you'd be surprised at how many of them have a pretty tried and true format that really follows monastic life. It follows the life of the church. And so you even get a kind of a deeper dive into what the church's breathing rhythms on her life of nourishment and breath is all about too.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that was helpful for you. Let us know, backchat@catholicunderground.com, or you can let us know in the chat if you're watching us live on Facebook Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Central Time. We have our rolling segment that I don't think has any audio tag to it, so if you're watching us on the radio, it's okay, but it's the part of the show that we like to call Catholic word search.
Pew, pew, pew.
Well, there's the audio for it now.
There you go. Yeah.
Love
So Catholic word search is that part of the show that we pick a word, any word, and I show you that word
The
used to be
root of that
Catholic
word
and Greek.
is Greek.
And in fact, just so happens that today's Catholic word search is a Greek
It is
word.
Greek. I quote that in class a lot, and my students don't think it's funny.
Ah, well.
But I'm like, literally, it's
Like a
going to
dad
be Greek,
mom
Latin,
joke.
or Hebrew.
Yeah. So parousia is the word, or parousia.
Parousia.
Do you know who I saw yesterday? I saw Chris Cole. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
Hi, Chris, if you're watching. He is an ensign in the Navy Reserves now. And indeed, he was there. I saw him. I was like, I recognize the top half of your face. Who are you? And he came up to me. He says, Father, you don't remember? Because he was in a group called the Parousians, which was a philosophical group. So the Parousia, Olivia.
Yes, it's one of my favorite topics. So it's the end times, the apocalypse. This is the word. It comes from a Greek word meaning arrival. So ousia just means like being or essence, and par just means like, well, we don't have time to get into that. But so there's the whole word together just means like a new presence or an arrival.
I think we have the spelling if they want to see it on the screen.
Yes,
So,
perfect. And so the specific arrival or presence that we're talking about when we say parousia is the coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ. Now, we have to specify because Christ came before, right? He came in the incarnation, the nativity, right? And then his life, death, passion, well, first his life, passion, death, resurrection, ascension, right? And there's actually 3 comings of Christ, which I think gets glossed over. But so there's the incarnation, but then within the parousia, there's really like 2 kinds of comings of Christ. So there's the end times, which we are currently like waiting for, right? We are anticipating the parousia. So we're kind of caught between the first coming and the second coming.
Yeah.
But we're kind of in like, 1A or like in anticipation of like 2, because we still have Christ coming now, and it's in the parousia, which is happening now, which is on our altars in the Eucharist.
That's right.
Right? Heaven is still touching down to earth right now on our altars in the Mass. And that is the parousia. It is not any different or any separate from what will happen or will occur at the end times.
That's right. It's an arrival and an apocalypse. I think we forget that when we go to Mass, we are entering into the apocalypse.
Yes.
We are entering into the fulfillment of all things.
Yeah.
And that's why we are not called to be scared about what comes next.
Yeah.
Because we are willfully encountering it every time we go to the Mass. Of course, it's veiled.
Yes.
Right. It's a sacramental reality that's veiled, but it is the Lord. It is His coming. It is His advent, and to not be afraid of it. Because are you afraid to go to Mass? Well, some may be, but I think the reason that a lot of people are afraid to go to Mass is because they don't think that they'll be welcomed, or they don't think that they'll find what they're looking for, or they're ashamed.
Right.
But that's why we have those sacraments that help us to experience the parousia of the Mass. Right. And so to be able to throw off our shame and throw off our guilt and go to the sacrament of reconciliation so that we're ready to go to Mass. Imagine that. Nothing impure can be in the presence of God when the actual second coming happens, right? When our Lord comes back. And so the sacramental realities are preparing us for the time in which we will meet the Lord without the veil of the sacrament.
Right. So we are unveiled, and we can unveil ourselves through the sacramental realities here and now. Purgatory can help achieve that for us. It's still in anticipation of the end times, but after death, right?
Yep.
And then there will be this final unveiling. That's what apocalypse means, right? It's that term. It's been hijacked, right, by Hollywood, but it apocalypsis just means the unveiling, right? Specifically, the unveiling of the bride. Right? The bride, that's how Revelation ends. The Bible begins and ends with a wedding. And it's the coming of the bride, the New Jerusalem descending from heaven, this new temple, this New Jerusalem descending. And the apocalypsis is the unveiling of that bride. And the wedding feast of the Lamb That is how Revelation ends.
Yep.
And so, yes, the apocalypse is going to have it's going to be the recreation of heaven and earth, and there are going to be these natural events. So, like, when you see these movies about the apocalypse and it's like, fire falling from, heaven and
the
like
earthquake.
there's earthquakes and mountains splitting in half. Sure. Right. That's like usually the people are referring to like the breaking open of the sixth seal in Revelation 6. Look it up. And those things will happen, but the natural and the supernatural are always occurring together, right? And what's happening there is the recreation of heaven and earth, right? The redemption of the earth so that it can be prepared. It's like tilling the soil, right? God preparing, Jesus preparing the bridegroom, preparing his father's house for the bride who is coming.
That's right, which is part of the Jewish marriage ritual, right? The preparation of the bridal chamber, the preparation of the wedding feast. And if you look at it, I could be wrong here, but I think that we can say that we are betrothed in baptism, right? And that betrothal, which is part of the Jewish wedding ceremony, where you're wed. The betrothal is a very real part of the marriage rite, and so even through the sacrament of the Eucharist, we begin to experience that readying of the bridal chamber. We begin to experience that wedding feast of the Lamb here.
Yeah.
And it's not completely consummated until everything until the parousia has concluded, if you will.
Yeah. And that won't happen until the bride is ready.
Yep.
That's what Revelation says.
And so thanks be to God that the Lord is patient and that we are being readied, and we're being readied through the church.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's tough for us to make those connections, because the Mass, especially as we see it today, sometimes can look like a production, and yet it's not. It's a liturgy, and liturgies peel back the veil ever so slightly so that we can go into the reality that it signifies. Yeah. As always, the Catholic Underground is in fact made possible by viewers like you, by listeners like you, and by prayer warriors and benefactors like you. If you want to become an official Undergrounder, Jeff, they can go to CatholicUnderground.com, right? /donate. That's the one. And you can help us by letting others know about us. So, Jeff, I believe we want them to like us.
Star us.
Yeah.
Definitely.
To heart us.
Yeah, heart us.
And if you've got a platform of choice that has any of those, do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
say something nice, too.
And say something nice.
Leave us a
yeah,
review.
exactly. I know Spotify has the ability, iTunes has the ability for you to say something nice if you like what you hear.
Very good.
Please leave a favorable comment. Our panelists this week have been Kathleen Lee at KLee626 on Instagram. Yep. And Olivia Galino is the.real.omg on Instagram and Twitter.
True.
Yes. We've also had Jeff Blackwell, our technical director, at Jeff Blackwell Us on Twitter. Hey, Jeff,
a privilege to be here.
Oh, yes, indeed. The privilege is ours. We've also had Ed Ball, who is our video director. Jim Hayes is our research assistant with his crew in the lab. And you know me. I'm Father Chris Decker. You can find me at Digital Catholic on Instagram and Twitter. I feel like I need to do some art. Maybe I'll do that soon. Yeah,
good.
You've been listening to the Catholic Underground, cutting through the noise. You can find that still small voice. My friends, we hope your Lent is going well, and we will see you next time.
From the Catholic Underground.